Thank the gentleman. We'll recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Terry and Mr. Heyer, I want to begin by expressing our condolences and sympathies ongoing for the loss of your son, Special Agent Terry. And I want to ask you a question in just a moment, but Special Agent Dobson, there was a franticness, an obsessiveness exhibited by federal law enforcement officers with respect to narcotics, controlled delivery of pornography, even money, which is not inherently dangerous as firearms and narcotics and pornography would be. This obsessiveness, this franticness of never letting that walk. So that would be only intensified if you were working with firearms. From the very first moment I heard about Fast and Furious, it has vexed me how anyone could have ever thought this investigative scheme was going to work. I don't know how a line agent would think it was going to work, and that's why line agents have supervisors and assistant U.S. attorneys, and U.S. attorneys to say, wait, your heart might be in the right place, but this may be the dumbest idea I have ever heard. How did this investigative scheme get started? Who thought it was ever going to work?
Well, sir, I can tell you I can't tell you where the idea originated from or who was ultimately responsible for beginning it. But apparently, or what I can tell you directly is everyone in my chain of command, up to and including the former director, was well briefed on the case, well versed on it, and knew the strategy coming and going. And they all thought it was a great idea. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Arizona, as well as up to Maine Justice, were briefed on it. You yourself know the requirements of big cases or big problems, and the briefings you have to go all the way to OEO, the Office of Enforcement Operations, to do some of the techniques involved in the investigation that we were doing. The OSADEF funding that we had, the proposals that were written for that, it was all spelled out, sir. Everyone knew it. It was there in black and white. And I always thought as soon as we got to the next level, somebody's going to shut it down. As soon as they hear about it, it's going to get shut down. But that never happened. It kept getting more funding, more approval, more attaboys. The people that were running it were called to D.C. several times to brief it at headquarters, at special operations divisions, and over at Maine Justice. And it just seemed it was the new strategy. All the rule books that you and I are aware of were thrown out. I worked with DEA for a number of years. We were never allowed to walk dope, not a gram of it. And walking money was, we would have to go and work a case through a county to get approval to that. DEA would not authorize it. So when I heard that we were walking guns, it was completely alien to me.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because it's alien to me too. I cannot imagine letting someone that you even suspect to be a straw purchaser purchase a firearm and then let that firearm navigate its way through the criminal element only to be recovered at a crime scene. I find it unfathomable that anyone could ever have thought this would turn out any differently than with the mother of a slain federal law enforcement agent and/or ordinary citizen sitting at a table. I honestly, I have tried to give the benefit. I actually like federal law enforcement officers. I'm probably biased towards them. I'm just struggling to understand how this ever could have turned out any other way. As soon as the gun leaves the parking lot, unless you're maintaining constant surveillance, then you've lost the gun. And then if it crosses the border, God knows what you're going to do with it. And then when you learn they didn't even let our Mexican counterparts in law enforcement know what was going on, this is the most eminently predictable tragedy that I've been connected with since I've been in Congress. It could not have turned out any other way. Ms. Terry, I want to ask you one question, and then I will have a very brief conversation with the chairman. For lots of America, they view your son as a hero, but all they have seen is a still photograph of a young man in uniform. What would you like our fellow citizens to know about your son that they may not know?
Brian was like a special person. He was He was a true American. He was just dedicated to his country. He loved being in the limelight. He loved helping people, protecting people, and that's what he always wanted to do.
Well, thank you. He was wired differently. The different uniforms that he wore, most of us are not wired to want to run towards danger. Most of us are wired to protect ourselves first and foremost, and not others. So you raised an outstanding human being, and I know that, I hope that that provides some level of comfort to you, even in the throes of your grief. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I would just say this. Perhaps I have missed something. I thought the administration said that they were not part of the approval and were not part of the process and had nothing to do with this investigative scheme. So I guess I'm vexed in how you can use a defense of deliberative process if you were not part of the process. And I would encourage you to share this report with the chairman of the subcommittee that provides appropriations for the Department of Justice. His name is John Culbertson from Texas. And I would encourage you to share this report for this reason. We all have privileges and rights, and all across America, every day people waive those privileges and rights because there's an incentive to waive them. I would give DOJ an incentive to waive their privilege, and I might do it through the subcommittee chair on appropriations.
Thank the gentleman.
You've talked a lot about the flexibility of states as being preeminent. So I want to go back to Indiana, to Bloomington in particular, and look at the Lighthouse Christian Academy. The Lighthouse Christian Academy currently receives over $665,000 in state vouchers for students to attend their school. They are also clear in their handbook and their guidance that if you are from a family where there is homosexual or bisexual activity, their word, not mine, or practicing alternate gender identity, you may be denied admissions. If this school, which obviously is approved to discriminate against LGBT students in Indiana, if Indiana applies for this federal funding, will you stand up that this school be open to all students?
Thank you, Congresswoman, for your question with regard broadly to school choice. And
it's actually kind of narrow because I have 1 minute left.
And I would like to refer back to your question about the comment about those
I'm sure you would. I want to ask particularly, is there a line for you on state flexibility? You are the backstop for students in their right to access a quality education. Would you, in this case, say, we are going to overrule and you cannot discriminate, whether it be on sexual orientation, race, special needs, in our voucher programs? Will that be a guarantee from you for our students?
For states who have programs that allow for parents to make choices, they set up the rules around that.
So that's a no. Do you see any circumstance where the Federal Department of Education under your leadership would say that a school was not qualified? What if they said, we are not accepting African American students, but that was okay with the state? Does the state trump? Do you see any situation where you would step in?
Well, again, I think the Office of Civil Rights and our Title IX protections are broadly applicable across the board. But when it comes to parents making choices on behalf of their students...
This isn't about parents making choices. This is about use of federal dollars. Is there any situation, would you say to Indiana, that school cannot discriminate against LGBT students if you want to receive federal dollars? Or would you say the state has the flexibility in this situation?
I believe states
yes or no?
continue to have flexibility in putting together their programs.
So if I understand your testimony, I want to make sure I get this right. There is no situation of discrimination or exclusion that if a state approved it for its voucher program, that you would step in and say that's not how we're going to use our federal dollars. There's no situation, if the state approved it, that you would put the state flexibility over our students. Is that your testimony?
I think a hypothetical in this case is.
It's not a hypothetical. This is a real school applying for,
Lady,
that
young
receives
lady's time
dollars.
has expired, but I'm going to allow the secretary to answer.
I go back to the bottom line is we believe that parents are the best equipped to make choices for their children's schooling and education decisions, and too many children today are trapped in schools that don't work for them. We have to do something different. We have to do something different than continuing a top-down, one-size-fits-all approach. And that is the focus, and states and local communities are best equipped to make these decisions and framework on behalf of their.
I am shocked that you cannot come up with one example of discrimination that you would stand up for students.